today. Our first one will be Professor Kaisa Väänänen.
Väänänen.
Thank you so much for correcting. I hope you pronounced wrong. She's a full professor of human technology interaction at Tampere University in Finland, where she leads the research group of human-centered technology. From this perspective today, you're going to talk about insights into the research cycle and how large language models can transform this process. Very curious about that as well. Introduction.
Okay, this is the first win of the day. Okay, so nice to meet you all. I'm Prof Kaisa Väänänen from Tampere University in Finland. And yeah, this is the topic I was proposed to talk about, and I'm going to spend like maybe some 15 minutes, and then if you have some questions or comments or suggestions, then let's spend a few minutes on that. So yeah, so first of all, I mean, actually, before we dive in there, I like to ask, how many of you have like a computer science background? Okay, so really a majority. And how many of you possibly have some human-computer interaction background? Maybe 20, 25%, 20% perhaps, okay. And how many, those of you who have different backgrounds, so what kind, can you maybe just shout out what kind of like study or research background you have, which fields?
Bachelor Electrical Engineering,
okay.
And the Master System Engineering and
Okay, all right, but engineering. Okay, any other? Yes? Yeah, go ahead.
Data science.
Data science, yeah, so yeah, I didn't mention that. Okay.
Psychology.
Psychology, and you?
Social sciences.
Okay, all right. Anybody else still? Yes?
AI.
AI, yeah, of course. Yeah, I kind of maybe thought that would be part of computer science, but of course we can debate that, yeah. But that's a good point, yeah.
Bachelor's in computer science, masters in AI.
Okay, right. And you? Also,
yeah.
Okay. And well, let me then ask again, how many of you have this AI background, so that you feel like, yeah, so about half. Okay, all right. And again, it wasn't an assumption that people should have any of these backgrounds, so it was really kind of like, of course, anybody can join, so it's really also nice to see some social scientist or psychology background here. Okay, but let me move on, because this is kind of related to my first point here, that don't assume when you go to your groups that you have the same worldview, because these different scientific fields, they really might have a very different kind of worldviews, what kind of knowledge is valid. For example, I guess many of you might have come across this sort of like, oh, I'm doing qualitative, very interpretative work, or I'm doing quantitative experiments. So for example, these kind of maybe, I don't know if they're extremes, but these different approaches, people might have very different thinking in terms of how do we approach a problem, what is good research, what are valid research methods. So when you get to your groups, please have this discussion amongst yourself, like what kind of maybe views to what research is and what kind of research you personally do. So at least that you can then understand each other better. So moving on to this actual topics of research cycle. So there are of course many different models, and I will present here a few just to give a sense. And again, because how many of you are actually working in research right now? Really a vast majority, almost everybody, but not quite. And how many of you are in industry or industrial research? Well, that's research. So industry, more or less, yeah, few hands. Okay, yeah. And of course, many people might have like literature and background of these. But so if we think at this sort of like a broader picture of research cycle, we have this, because usually we might think of this, okay, once we jump into actually doing the research, starting to collect the data, that's when the research starts. But of course there are all these preparatory stages where we have to, well, from the very first idea, maybe discuss with potential partners, establish collaboration, find these interdisciplinary gaps and complementarities. So this is of course a very important part of this whole research cycle, to forming the big picture and setting up the sort of like the stage for the actual, well, of course, then you have to write proposal and get funding and all that, unless you are one of the lucky ones who actually already have your funding given to you, but usually you have to sort of work on actually getting the money. And then, of course, after you've done the research, or usually, of course, you would already publish something while you are doing that, but of course, at least in the end, or towards the end of the research project, you will start writing papers and hopefully get them, and for sure you will get them published somewhere, just being persistent and writing those publications. So there's one big picture view of this, and I believe we can make these slides available, so if you want to maybe in the beginning of your group work kind of a little bit discuss, okay, do we want to focus on this stage or that stage, then you can access these slides. I think they will be put on the website. So there's another one which is actually pretty similar, but you can see some differences here. So here's again from ideas, partners, proposal writing, and then study preparation, methods, data collection, process analyze data. Pretty much the same stages, but with some terminology differences. Again, in your group, establish the common ground for what kind of words you will and terms you will use for these different phases, especially when you decide to focus on maybe on a specific stage, on a specific method in a specific stage, or whether you actually want to have a look like in this model there is this sort of like a dotted line around this sort of like this supervision, like somebody needs to manage the whole thing. So of course you might maybe think of a tool that can help with that. So you can choose different approaches to your hackathon topic. So going to the kind of like this more in the actual research stages here. Again, you can obviously find the different ways to split up these different phases. So here this starts in the topmost part of this. So define the research question. So create proposal and data management plan, which is of course very important. Sometimes we might feel that, oh, that's a boring, necessary thing to do. But of course it's super important, as I'm sure you as good researchers know. So then you go through this stage and there are different ways to model these processes. There's another one just again for reference and seeing that of course we can sort of capture these stages in a different manner. Okay, and then there's yet another one. I'm not going to go through this, but just to show that this one actually, what I found nice about is that it actually shows all these different stages in even a bit more granularity. So for example, going to the publication cycle, what they call a cycle here is draft work, writing workshop. So they sort of like give a bit more sort of like granularity to what can happen within these cycles. Okay, so then just one example here from and how this can relate to generative AI. And of course, in this short talk, I'm not going to even try to sort of go to any depth here, but this is an example actually from a special interest group paper that will appear in KAI conference in later this spring. Pasant is the main author in that, and there's lots of us as co-authors there, just as an example of what in human-computer interaction could be some of the steps and some of the opportunities for using generative AI. So in these different stages, and again, of course, you will see here these sort of like stages that were already in the previous slides. Maybe what is very special for human-computer interaction, and that might also apply to some of your work, and probably does, is that there is often some kind of construction, a prototype or something that is being created based on some data, and then it will be evaluated, or data will be collected, evaluated. So there is an iterative cycle here happening here, and of course the iteration can of course go through more of those stages. But so that's something that is, for example, very not specific, but it is very important and emphasized a lot in the human-computer interaction research, that humans are in that loop, that means different than the human in the loop in the AI field, but kind of that there are sort of feedback collected from people. But could some of that be delegated to these generative models? And there is actually another paper which I encourage you to read by Albert Schmidt, who will be here, I suppose, soon, and Pasant and others. So that's also a really nice read where you can see the ideas of how generative AI could even replace the presence of human beings in some parts of this loop, which obviously has its dangers, but there can be some ways, and I know maybe Jay will be talking about this, so I'm not going to go more in detail here. So just to give some maybe ideas of what could be generative AI's role in research. So let me now still ask you, so what do you think would be good reasons for using generative AI for or in research? Maybe you have thought about it before coming here. If not, just anybody who's brave enough just to shout out any ideas. Why should we use generative AI in research? No? Yes?
You just showed us all the reasons, right? Because it can be applied basically on every part of the research cycle and
sure.
In a way enhance it.
Yeah, enhance, okay.
Yep.
Enhance can also mean many things, so can you maybe, what kind of enhancement could it bring?
It can speed things up.
Speed things up.
Like it can summarize papers for me.
Okay.
I don't have to go
Sure.
and read every detail, every
Speeding
sentence.
things up, okay, that's obviously a very, Kaisa.
It can enhance diversity and inclusion for non-native speakers because sometimes the thought process is right, but the writing style is really putting them at a disadvantage.
Okay, that's a very good one. Okay, anything else? Yes?
Companion for the brainstorming from the beginning.
Yeah, very nice idea. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I just wrote here some things, and I think there were some of the things that you said, maybe not necessarily on this list, especially this companion thing is very nice. Diversity, absolutely. So there are certainly many benefits that we can see in applying or utilizing generative AI in research. But then on the other hand, of course, there could be some reasons why not. Anybody wants to sort of jump and say something? Why should we not maybe use generative? Yes?
Accuracy.
Accuracy, okay. So loss of, or kind of fear of losing accuracy, or, okay. Anything else?
For only generic insights?
Sorry?
So only generic insights?
Right, so that
depth.
right, okay, so you might lack depth in insights when, as a researcher, okay. Hassan?
For the lack of better word, lots of times it's mansplaining, so the text looks nice, but it's actually very cyclic and you lose the actual thought process out of it.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Yes?
It might be very convincingly put, but the message itself might not be useful, so then if you copy that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit related to what Pasant was saying, that even though it looks like as a text, if we're now talking about the kind of text production, of course we also have other generative AI models with other modalities, but it can be indeed sort of like convincing looking, but still feel like empty and shallow in a way, and of course even false, of course there can be, as we I'm sure all know. So I wrote here some things as well, so risks in this model bias, responsibility, transparency, sense of authorship, loss of agency as researchers, so I think relating to what a couple of you were saying. Of course, we might also question whether always being more productive is always a good thing. So maybe that's also one thing to think about. And of course also, what do we learn as researchers? So what do we enjoy in research? Do we enjoy diving into data, or do we just want to give that agency of sort of like really exploring the data to someone or something else? So maybe there are also these reasons. So again, in your groups, maybe you can have a little bit discussion of these factors as well. And I don't know how much time I have left. A few minutes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So because I have a user experience research background, and I guess we didn't yet do the lightning talks, but I will say a few more words about that at point. So I wanted to bring up this perspective because very often we think about productivity, again, making things more efficient, making things more accurate, and so on. But I think what we should also think about is this sort of like, what are the users' experiences? And now I don't necessarily mean the users of the end product that is going to the market, but for the researchers. Researchers are the users of your tools that you will be designing here. Most likely, of course, you might target your research, your hackathon thing to a research manager or something, administrative personnel or so. But so it's really important to think of what are the enjoyable things, what gives us meaning. So there is this, well, there are loads of different UX models, but this is one that is kind of simplistically divides these kind of like different product features into categories. This is by Marcus and so where these pragmatic features are more of those necessary functions in the tool that we are designing. But on the hedonic side or the emotional side, we really need to think of what gives meaning to the people who are then using our tools. So we don't sort of get rid of the good stuff that we do enjoy when we do our research. And the next slide, this is my last slide actually. So again, I don't expect you, because it's quite a short hackathon, so I don't expect you to start doing any sort of fancy experience design studies here, but there is, maybe you could still think about in the beginning about this sort of like hedonic or user experience, or what I called here researcher experience, or REX. So what are their sort of expected experiences? Do they want to explore? Do they want to be efficient? Do they want to partner with the AI tool? So think about a little bit of what might be the expected researcher experience as the result of using your tool that you are developing here. And there's one example, if you again, like we are going to share the slides. So if you want to look at this playful experience cards, they give suggestions to different types of experience. There's like competition, there's connectedness, which is of course very important. Don't forget about to think about the sort of like research community, your fellow researchers, and how do you interact with each other when you do research. So you might want to think about this a little bit in your group works. So not to get rid of the fun stuff, but get rid of the boring stuff. Okay, so I think, okay, so here's just this list which is on the website. I'm not going to go through this. This was the end of my talk. If you have some suggestions or questions, then please shoot. Don't shoot me, but
You don't want to go for that here on camera.
okay, thanks.
Would you share these slides?
Yeah, we will put them on the website.
We will put them on the website in the next break.
So you can then before you start your group work, you can have a look. Yeah. Anything else?
Comments, suggestions, questions?
How do you use generative AI in your research?
In my research? Well, for example, I mean, I think it was you who mentioned that sort of like, companion in a way of kind of like in the ideation phase.
Brainstorming.
Kind of brainstorming. I think that's the best word to describe it. That's the thing that I'm currently using it for. I'm still quite cautious of bringing it too much further. Of course, I'm very, very interested in seeing what kind of tools come up, even in this hackathon, the ideas, because I'm sure that some of them will be in some form or another appear in the market or in the to be available for us. So that's currently, and of course I use creating pictures for presentations and sort of finding out about complex concepts that I don't know that well, because my work tends to be very interdisciplinary. So I might sort of pick up. More recently, I was looking into urban informatics. So how does the smart city or the urban informatics community use certain terms? So I think that's very useful. Of course, I always go and find them actual articles to back them up, but just to get me started. So I think for that it's very nice companion, so to speak. Thanks for the question. Yes?
Do you think there's a lot of criticism on the use of LLMs in academics, and how do you deal with that?
That is an interesting question. I think probably again different scientific fields react to this in different ways. I think in general in engineering, computer science, I mean not too surprisingly, we are probably quite open to exploring these kind of tools. Maybe some other fields, I don't know, maybe I would like to hear from our kind of psychology and social science people how you see this question, but I think there's maybe some more criticism, and which is good. I mean, it's really important to criticize these as well, and really think of whether it's good or not good to use these in certain phases. But for example, our university, and I'm sure all the universities these days have their guidelines, and at least for us in my university, they are quite open. They tell that, well, you can use a generative AI as long as you precisely describe how and document and describe in your outputs how you use it. So I think that's a very generic sort of guideline, but I think it's a good guideline. But I'm still cautious, to give it too much agency to these tools.
Okay. Do you think others negatively misperceive your content when they know that it has parts generated with AI?
Yeah.
Can you
I mean,
reflect a bit
honest
on
answer
that?
is I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Like just observations.
That's my sense is that again it really depends on the person. Like in one of our interdisciplinary projects I was working with, we are working with architects. And for example, that professor of architecture, she was very cautious and she was saying that no, we should not use this for anything. And then I was like, yeah, but our university guidelines say this and we can still use it for this part, at least like language checking or something, as long as we obviously check it afterwards. But I really don't know, like by and large, what's the perception of people, especially if you use it a lot. I was thinking about that in terms of supervising a master's thesis because I knew that that person wanted to use it for quite many things. And I was thinking, okay, if he or she uses it for like really a major part of the work, how will I as a supervisor or examiner then perceive it's sort of like the authorship, which is of course a big topic in itself, and the value and their sort of creativity and even their sort of learning from that work. So it's a very hard question, it's hard to answer. Yes?
As you mentioned earlier, that every university has its own guidelines. Is there any initiative to unify guidelines?
Yeah. There is on European level, maybe Pasant even knows better. I mean, I haven't...
So some parts are being governed by the AI Act, which is like on a much higher level, and then you have the bigger organizations. So for example, for the publications, ACM and IEEE each is having their own set of guidelines, and they are currently communicating to try to merge it a bit because it's still different. But it's not unified. I think it came out quite fast before actually the legislations were ready for it, and we're still figuring out how people are actively using it. But everyone is going towards making it more restrictive and banning the usage, at least on the level of higher organizations at the moment.
That's.
Isn't it the same with all new technology? Legislation.
Yes.
Right?
I think legislation usually thinks that technology comes out and it takes a lot of time before it's like fully used, which gives some time to.
That's
but
a false hypothesis.
Exactly, we've seen that with social media happening before, and then the deep fakes, and then the AI. So there's a surge, but there's a lot of work being done on the low side at the moment.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the speed has been spectacular, as I'm sure we all know here. So that sort of causes some maybe struggles or challenges with making this more unified. But for example, I was spending last autumn in Brisbane, in Australia, in Queensland University of Technology, and I was looking at their guidelines. So they were pretty similar to, for example, what we had in my university. And at the same time, I looked at some others. Of course, there are nuances and how things are expressed. But I think the sort of in general, the universities seem to be quite permissive in terms of using AI. And again, as long as there's the documentation